One of the best things in life are the pleasant little surprises that help you get through a rough patch. Finding a $20 bill in a winter coat, or maybe seeing the hot girl from high school who shot you down in the cafeteria in front of everybody after you slipped and landed face first in a tray of mystery meat, had put on about 400 pounds and was pushing a cart full of kids diverse enough to fully staff the next Disney Plus Star Wars failure. Sometimes that happens with movies too. You know the ones. You go in with fairly low expectations and walk out nodding your head and saying, you know what, that was pretty damn good. Happened when I saw Maverick a ways back. Almost happened when I left Romulus a couple weeks ago. But you're here for a review of 2024's The Crow, so let me zero in on it a bit. Now, I'll admit, I definitely dunked on the trailer whenever ago. But can you blame me? There's been exactly one good movie in this franchise. One. Uno. Eins. Satu. There's also been 3 sequels and a late 90s TV series that's about as forgettable as an Applebee's chicken parm. To be fair, it's not like The Crow back in '94 was the gold standard of cinema or anything. Sure, it was commercially successful, aided by an absolute all-time banger of a soundtrack, and the tragic on-set death of rising star Brandon Lee, but it wasn't without its own issues as far as movies go. That said, it's long since become a legitimate cult classic, a time capsule from the 90s containing all the dark, edgy, angsty vibes you could possibly stand. So how does The Crow 2024 stack up? Well, if I remember my trailer reaction right, I was at least half right. Let's take a look. Now, this may shock you, but despite what you may have seen on the review sites online, The Crow 2024 is not a remake of the '94 original film, which itself was based on the '89 James O'Barr series of comic books. It shares a title, a couple of character names, and the very bare bones of plot. And that's it, dear friends. The similarities end there. This Crow flies its own way, taking something familiar and telling a wildly different story while keeping to only the most critical of the original plot points. In this Crow, we meet recovering addicts Eric and Shelley as they meet in a court-appointed drug rehab. Eric's in because life hasn't been pretty. Shelley's there because she dropped a bag of suspicious white powder in front of a couple of cops while fleeing a sketchy bad guy who wanted to ask her about a video she shouldn't have seen. The pair immediately hit it off and decide to bail on the program when Shelley's pursuers pay the rehab a visit. All's well for a little while until sketchy cardboard cutout bad guys catch up with them and successfully pull off the hit as ordered by cardboard cutout Big Bad, who played the starring role in Shelley's No-No video. In the world between worlds, Eric makes contact with a cardboard cutout mysterious advisor who offers him the chance and power to go back to the land of the living with the mystical powers of the Crow to claim vengeance by punishing the cardboard cutout villains, who apparently had arranged some sort of demonic pact for immortality by damning innocent souls to hell or something. Draven agrees and goes back to get his John Wick on. And that's The Crow 2024 in a cardboard cutout nutshell. Notice how I said cardboard cutout like 9 times in that synopsis? Yeah. The Crow 2024 is nearly 2 hours of wall-to-wall mural of cardboard cutout, painted over at times with some fleeting but interesting visuals and a healthy splattering of the red stuff. But other than that, it's a paper-thin, hollow affair that lacks everything that made the original Crow the icon that it is. Moody, gothic tone that paints a bleak picture of the world we live in? Nope. An interesting protagonist that's got some charisma and personality? A stable of memorable villains for the hero to take down as he climbs the tower to an equally memorable big bad? Not in this movie. I know this sounds bad, but it's not so much bad as it is dull and forgettable. The story here takes about an hour to get going, opting to spend the time trying to develop the relationship between Eric and Shelley in order to make their inevitable separation a real gut punch. The attempt at character development somehow comes up short though, making the eventual rampage Draven goes on feel about as hollow as winning a video game with God mode in it. Skarsgård has a different take on Draven, choosing a more introverted, broken soul version of the character as opposed to Brandon Lee's original, sardonic, more animated version. And FKA, whoever she is about as wooden as a 40-year-old virgin in a nudie bar. Despite the dull as ditchwater plot progression and performances, there's a couple of positives to take away, and maybe those flashes of original creative work are enough to get your crow cawing. First, the writers added additional supernatural elements to the world of the Crow. The big bad having a demonically empowered mind control ability and a literal deal with a devil widens the scope of the world and opens the door for other future supernatural threats. Better explaining how the Crow powers work, and particularly the limitations that he'll heal injuries but will still feel the pain, and that the power only works if his love for Shelley remains undoubted, are interesting checks against the usual power creep that happens in these kind of movies. The problem is both of these rules are abandoned down the stretch, and the final act of the movie could have been cut from a John Wick sequel. There's also more than enough blood spilled, bones broken, and all types of other wanton violent mayhem going on to keep enthusiasts of R-rated flicks mostly happy. Another downgrade from the original is the lack of supporting characters to tether Draven to the human world and for the audience to go along for the ride with. Characters like teenage skater Sarah and beat cop officer Albrecht are sorely missing here as Draven's friends and allies. Small scenes where Draven does right by the people he left behind helped flesh out the original character and make him more than a one-note anti-heroic killing machine, and The Crow 2024 skips these entirely. Sadly, this goes for antagonists as well. Lee's Crow had to deal with garbage pawn shop owners, low-level mob thugs, and a colorfully varied rogues gallery of Tintin, Funboy, and T-Bird before facing off with the boss, Top Dollar. In The Crow 2024, Draven just activates kill mode and brutalizes his way to the boss through a bunch of disposable corporate security types, and then kills the boss in the lamest way possible. Spoiler alert, he punches him a lot. When I walked out of The Crow 2024, I knew I needed a new graphic to add to my collection of Winterwolf approves and rejects rating system. I needed something to cover middle of the road for the truly mid movies out there. On the one hand, this movie was boring and poorly paced for half the runtime, and featured forgettable characters in an overdone, familiar story. On the other hand, the writers at least attempted to avoid true remake status and attempted to build some interesting mythology to a well-trodden series of films, and I can appreciate that. But they could have just as easily titled this movie Vengeance and used some other mechanism to bring the hero back and drop the Crow motif altogether. They probably would have benefited from avoiding any sort of backlash or wary skepticism from fans of the original. The fighting and the gore were on point, some of the world-switching visuals were cool, and those gotta count for something too. Maybe I'm feeling generous, but compared to some of the other crap that skates by as remake or a retelling these days, this one wasn't particularly offensive, it was just kind of boring. And I think that's going to reflect in my final score. It's not the best, it's not the worst. If anything, The Crow 2024 is a straight 6 out of 10. And I'd like to invite you guys to let me know in the comments below where you stand on it. See you in the next one.